Did you know that before Pixar became the Pixar we know today, there was some serious drama with Disney? And what if I told you that a super famous guy you've definitely heard of was one of Pixar's founders, and you probably have no idea who it is? Today you're going to learn the true and secret story of Pixar. What they didn't tell you, I'll tell you now. Welcome to Cine Lovers. Our story begins with a guy named John Lasseter. You've probably heard of him. Well, John was in high school when he fell in love with a book called The Art of Animation, which talked about how Disney made its animated films. From that moment on, he decided he wanted to work with animation. So John went to study animation. He had the passion, but back then, he didn't know a thing yet. 1975. John Lasseter enrolled at Cal Arts, an animation school founded by Walt Disney himself in 1961. There, John learned how to animate in the Disney style. His teachers were top-tier Disney veterans, retired or near retirement, who decided to teach everything they knew to pass the animation legacy of Disney to the next generation. In his class were Tim Burton, yes, the guy behind Corpse Bride and The Nightmare Before Christmas, and Brad Bird, the director of The Incredibles. Oh, and those teachers? They were Disney's legendary animators, especially from the 1930s, known as the Nine Old Men. 1978. John wanted to work and get closer to Disney, so he got a job as a janitor at one of the Disney parks. Later on, he ran the Jungle Cruise attraction at the Disney park. He went back to Cal Arts and created 2 animated short films there, which ended up winning 2 Oscars. That's when the animation world started paying serious attention to this guy. John Lasseter was becoming famous. 1979. With all that success, of course new doors started opening for him. That's when John finally landed his dream job at Walt Disney Studios. 2 years later, in 1981, he worked on his first animated film, The Fox and the Hound. But the film suffered budget cuts during production, and the final animation didn't turn out the way they had hoped. At the same time animation was going through tough times, a Disney subsidiary, a separate branch of Disney, had just released the movie Tron. And when John and his colleagues saw that, they were amazed, because it featured real actors alongside digital 3D backgrounds. That's when they started thinking, what if we did that, but with animation? You could say there was something in the air. Well, now John and his friend Glenn got Disney's permission to experiment with 3D animation techniques. But at the same time, some animators started to push back. Hold on, we've always done animation by hand. Now they want to bring in computers? No way! This will put all of us animators out of work. Tension started to rise, because while John and Glenn saw a future in computer-generated animation, the rest of the team wanted to stick with traditional hand-drawn methods. John believed in his idea and the potential of 3D animation. That's when he created a short film called The Brave Little Toaster. It was John's moment to shine, and he went all in. He was combining traditional 2D animation with 3D, and this was back in the 1980s. Pretty wild, right? A studio that started from scratch with no money is now this massive force, making films and characters we all love. Anyway, they pitched the short film and showed the storyboard to the top executive at Disney. He asked a few questions, didn't seem very interested, and simply fired John Lasseter from the Disney studios. Unbelievable, right? Disney fired the guy who was about to revolutionize 3D animation. Disney would definitely regret that later, just like you would if you don't hit the like button on this video. Give it a like and make me super happy, and I'll bring even more stories from your favorite studios here on the channel. Now this is where a guy named Edwin Catmull enters the story. He was passionate about computers, physics, and drawing. He began working with computer graphics to create animations digitally. Ed was a genius. He even developed a software on his own called Tween, which could transform hand-drawn animation into 3D. Back in the late 70s and early 80s, George Lucas, the creator of Star Wars and founder of Lucasfilm, saw the potential in Ed and the tools he had built and said, "Hey man, you're good. Come work with me at Lucasfilm." So the two of them created a brand new computer graphics division inside Lucasfilm to develop digital tools, hardware, software, basically everything to merge technology with animation. They even worked on a new editing program that would later be called EditDroid. Things got wild. George Lucas was fired up about Ed's potential, and since George wanted to break into animation, their partnership was a perfect match. But something even bigger was on the horizon. What started happening next? Lucasfilm was hiring tons of people, animators, tech experts, scientists. They needed more professionals to help bring their vision to life. Their focus now was to make a fully computer-animated film, something that had never been done before. Everyone was working hard, researching and experimenting to figure out how they could make it happen. 1983. That year, Ed Catmull met John Lasseter, who had been fired from Disney 2 or 3 years earlier and was still really down about it. The two talked, and John was hired right then and there to work at Lucasfilm. He was nervous, but he accepted. Right away, they told him, "You came from Disney, animation, make a 3D animated short. That's when John created The Adventures of Andre and Wally B. For the time, it was incredibly impressive. But even then, John wanted more. He needed software that made animation easier. So John went to the Lucasfilm team, who he had just joined, and said, "Guys, you should create new software. It would really help animate short and long movements, plus improve image resolution and sharpness." They accepted the challenge and developed another groundbreaking program. 1986. That crew at Lucasfilm created the Pixar Image Computer, the most powerful graphics computer of its time. Its software turned images into 3D and was heavily used in medicine. They tried to sell it. It was revolutionary, but no one was buying. George Lucas started to lose interest. That's when a split started to form. George wanted to pull back from animation, but John and Ed wanted to keep going. So in that same year, 1986, they founded a new division out of Lucasfilm and named it Pixar. 1987. Now Pixar needed an investor, someone who could see their potential and believe in what they were trying to build. All they needed was the money. That's when Steve Jobs, one of the creators of Apple and the iPhone, paid a little visit to Lucasfilm. There, he met Ed Catmull. Ed shared with Steve his dream of making a fully 3D animated film. Steve was all in. He loved the idea and decided to invest big time in Pixar, $10 million. That was in 1987. That same year, Pixar wanted to create a short film in 3D that would reflect who they were. John Lasseter started brainstorming, and right in front of him was a lamp. You already know where this is going, right? 1988. Pixar was working on a short film called Tin Toy, which would go on to inspire a certain other story a few years later. The following year, that short won an Oscar, making it the first Academy Award ever given to a fully 3D animated film. 1989. Pixar started getting hired to create commercials, 3D commercials. They were pioneers in this space. They'd won an Oscar, gained serious recognition, and were revolutionizing animation. Suddenly, every brand wanted to be part of the 3D animation trend. To handle the demand, Pixar had to hire more animators. That's when John Lasseter brought on Pete Docter, who would later direct Monsters Incorporated, Up, and Inside Out. The second hire, Andrew Stanton, who would go on to direct Wall-E and Finding Nemo. That same year, 1990, Pixar started working with Disney. But wait, the same Disney that had fired John a decade earlier for wanting to pursue 3D animation? Yep, the very same. Only now, with new leadership that could see the success Pixar was having and the even bigger potential ahead. So the two companies started collaborating. Disney would bring the traditional 2D animation, and Pixar would bring in the 3D. The idea was to combine both styles in a single film. Pixar even developed a digital system called CAPS, Computer Animation Production System, which brought major technical advancements to 2D animation. It was used in The Rescuers Down Under in 1990 and Beauty and the Beast from 1991. But even with all this progress, Pixar was spending a lot and not making much in return. In fact, Steve Jobs lost $5 million over 5 years. Still, he believed in Pixar. He knew that in the long run, it would all pay off and bring in serious profit. Disney saw the rising buzz around Pixar and invited John Lasseter to return, offering him the role of director for their next animated feature. He had two options: take Disney's offer, get a solid paycheck, and lead a big budget project, or stay at Pixar, a company that was nearly broke but still held his dream. John chose Pixar, and thank goodness he did. If he had left, there's a good chance the Pixar we know today and its legendary films would never have existed. 1992. That's when John and the Pixar team came up with the idea of creating a full-length movie about toys that come to life. Remember when I mentioned that Tin Toy would inspire something bigger? Well, this was it. Disney saw potential in the concept and decided to partner with Pixar again, this time to help produce the world's first fully 3D animated feature film. That film would be called Toy Story, originally just a placeholder name, but it stuck. Now came the big challenge. What kind of story would they tell? They didn't want to do musicals. They didn't want fairy tales. In fact, Pixar wanted to do the opposite of what Disney was known for. They wanted to break new ground. 1993. Pixar had developed an early version of Toy Story and pitched it to Disney. The feedback? Brutal. Disney hated it, especially the character Woody, who came across as mean, annoying, and downright unlikable. Disney basically said, cancel Toy Story. Shut it down. Fire the team. But Pixar didn't give up. The team regrouped, rewrote, and reworked the story, making Woody more likable. style, fixing the pacing, and tightening the plot. Fun fact, the first fully animated scene they completed for Toy Story was the one with the little green army men on their stealth mission. They showed the new version to Disney. This time, the studio loved it. 1995, Toy Story finally hit theaters. It was a massive hit, both with audiences and critics. The film pulled in over $400 million at the global box office and even scored Oscar nominations. 1996, but despite all the success, Pixar didn't see much of the profits. Because of the deal they'd made with Disney, the majority of the money went to Disney, which, understandably, didn't sit well with Pixar. Then Pixar decided to go public, so they could get more investment, and it worked out really well. Pixar made money, and Disney wanted to renew the partnership. Steve Jobs said, "Alright, Disney, but only if the profits are split 50-50." And Disney agreed. Pixar expanded its studio, and new animators started joining the team. They had a lot of fun. They joked around, played, and worked hard. But then something happened that gave them a bit of a panic. After the success of their first movie, Toy Story, they thought, now what? The next movie has to be just as good, or even better. What do we do? After a bunch of meetings and conversations, Pixar decided to make a movie called A Bug's Life. 1998, A Bug's Life was released, and it was a success too. It didn't make as much money as Toy Story, but it still did really well. From that point on, Pixar knew how to do things and what kind of stories they wanted to tell. And the next movies were even bigger hits, like Monsters Incorporated, Cars, Finding Nemo, The Incredibles, and many others. 1999. That was the year all animation studios became sure that 3D animation was a success and made a lot of money. And starting that year, a lot of 2D animated movies began to flop at the box office, and 2D animation was on the verge of extinction. Studio execs were saying, "Oh, nobody wants to watch 2D anymore. People are tired of it. Now everyone just wants 3D." Well, it's true that most of the audience wanted to see more 3D than 2D at that point, but that wasn't the real reason 2D animation almost disappeared. The real issue was that most of those 2D movies had weak stories, and a bad story doesn't keep anyone's attention. A lot of 2D animators were getting fired, and some of them kind of blamed Pixar for it. And Pixar was honestly upset with what was happening, because even though they were pioneers in 3D animation, they also made and loved 2D animation. 2004, Disney and Pixar were at the end of their contract, but at the same time, both studios wanted to keep the partnership going. But then Disney had the worst idea ever. They came to Pixar and basically said, "Pixar, we want to make sequels to your movies. More Toy Story, more Monsters Incorporated. Let's keep making more and more sequels, but they'll go straight to DVD, and only we at Disney will produce them, not you." That made no sense at all. They basically wanted to cut Pixar out of the picture. Alright, that same year, Steve Jobs started talking to other studios to see if anyone was interested in partnering with Pixar, but he didn't have much success. 2005, a big twist was about to happen. Bob Iger became the new CEO of Disney. He showed up and said, "Hold up, everyone. We need to have a strong partnership with Pixar. They know how to make animation. They're successful. They make a lot of money, and the audience loves them." So he called up Steve Jobs and scheduled a meeting, just the two of them, along with John Lasseter and Ed Catmull. 2006, the partnership was sealed in an extraordinary way. Disney bought Pixar for $7.4 billion, but the three Pixar founders stayed and were given new roles. Steve Jobs became the largest shareholder at Disney. John Lasseter became the chief creative officer of both Disney and Pixar, and Ed Catmull became president of Walt Disney and Pixar Animation Studios. What a story! I gotta admit, I got emotional writing this script, and I'm so happy Pixar is still around today. If you love learning unexpected facts about animation companies, then click on these videos to watch more. Thanks a lot for watching until the end, and see you in the next video here on Cine Lovers.